I'm at speed.
You good?
Me too.
All right. Ready to get started?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's okay. We'll start by having you just state your name.
Well, my name, the name that people from White Bluffs will remember is Carrie, Carrie Jean Cotting.
Right.
That was my name there.
Right. Your name now is Jean Johnson.
Yes. I left the Carrie off.
Okay. Great. And my name is Robert Bauman, and we're doing this interview on July 31st of 2013 at Jean Johnson's home. And so I want to start interview by just asking you if you tell me a little bit about your family. If you know when they came to White Bluffs, how and why they came there, and when.
Well, my father was Leslie Andrew Cotting, known in White Bluffs as Andy. Andy Cotting. He came from Pennsylvania, somewhere here in the west, and came up the river and landed in White Bluffs in 106.
And do you know why he came to White Bluffs?
He was kind of an orphan when he was born. His mother died with birth.
Oh, okay.
And his grandmother and father raised him, and they couldn't take care of him, so an uncle took him. And his name was Andrew somebody else. Had sheep, and he wanted my dad to come there into Colorado or in the White Bluffs area and have sheep.
Okay.
Don't know if he ever did.
And so that's why he came to White Bluffs.
Mm-hmm.
And how about your mother?
My mother came from South Dakota. They went to Yakima. I don't know why. Then they went from Yakima to White Bluffs in 1912. And she married my dad in 1918 and they had four children. I have three older brothers than myself.
And so your parents met in White Bluffs then, is that?
Yes, they were neighbors. Because her name was Johnson also. She came in there as Irma Johnson. And then she married Cotting. That's what people are confusing when they say, what was your mother's maiden name? Johnson. So, then I went to work right from graduation to the Republic newspaper in Yakima.
In Yakima, okay.
And I worked there. I was only, I think I was maybe 17. I was going to say 16, because I did graduate a year earlier than in my age than I should have. And I could only work so many hours, because that was during the war. 43, I graduated from Yakima High School. And I had to sign a paper for Social Security number. I never had one before. So then that's when I took off the Carrie and just put Jean Cotting. Then, of course, as soon as I got married, I had to do it again.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about where you grew up in White Bluffs, your family farm,
Yeah.
what that was like, what sort of crops you grew, that sort of thing.
My father had apples. And we lived right next to the Columbia River, and we had a water pump and used to pump our water out of the river to irrigate. And then he had just a home, little bunch of fruit trees, peaches and pears and cherries, and a lot of people would come and pick them and can them, and my mother would can them. And they worked, they irrigated with pipe and plugs.
What kind of pipe? Do you know what that pipe was? Maybe?
Wooden.
Wood pipe?
Wooden pipe. And they had a cement, I don't even remember what they called it, that the water came from the river up and stayed in there, and then the pipes would drain off to put water in the field. And then the war came, and I was still in school because I was born in 1925. So he lost that place and had to move to another place. And the boys were all in the service by then, and he worked it by himself. And worked himself down. He got sick. But we stayed in White Bluffs. And then the trucks the cars were going through with the U.S. government, so we knew something was going to happen.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about the farm that you grew up on. Were there other buildings, or was there like a warehouse for storing some of the fruit, or any other sort of buildings besides?
Not then. We had a barn because we had a milk cow, and 2 horses. The horses used to pull the spray wagon, and then later years they put a pipe out to hold the spray, so they could just hook up and spray. And they were spraying at lime and sulfur or something like that. Was very after everybody was gone, I heard how dangerous that was.
And was that for insects?
Worms.
Worms.
But worms were eating him up. Nothing would stop them. And as I told you before, they didn't come with DDT until after the war started, which was too late for him.
Did you have electricity on your farm?
And my mother had an electric stove and electric washing machine. But it was just a small little house. And the school bus would not pick me up because I lived within 3 miles of the school.
So you walked to school?
So I had to walk to school. And there were 3 other girls there we all 4 of us had to walk to school, carrying our lunch buckets and our books. In no fear, every place we went, we walked. We had no fear. We knew everybody. And
do you remember the names of any of those girls that you used to walk to school with?
Yvonne Ponsett was one. Ponsat. Her father was French. And she had 2 brothers who were in high school with my brothers. Another one was Elizabeth Keel. I don't know what he does. He's around Yakima somewhere. He's probably gone by now, too. The other girl, I can't remember her name because she had moved there.
So walking to school, was that elementary school and high school, or?
High school.
High school.
Yeah, the school bus would take us to grade school, but not to high school.
But high school was closer to you.
And it was just across one field, but we walked over and walked down the road. And then eventually we all got bicycles.
Oh, okay.
But the bicycles were, we were almost grown by the time we could afford a bicycle.
Must have been a little tricky walking sometimes in the winter.
There were no winters there.
Oh, okay.
We lived so close to the river It was warm all winter. Don't remember any. I don't remember any snow. No snowmen, no snow fights, no icy roads.
And did you have a telephone at your house?
Oh yes, with the ringer, you know, you'd ring, number please, you know. You remember them?
I remember the dial phones.
Oh yeah. Well, this was just a telephone operator. And we also had RFD. We also had mail service. So, you know, it wasn't too remote.
So how far from the town were you? How far?
Well, they said I lived within 3 miles,
Okay.
and that was the limit for school, was 3 miles from town.
Do you remember any of your teachers from the school at all, from either grade school or high school? Did you have any favorite teachers or ones that you remember at all?
Well, those pictures reminded me. I did not remember them, yes, but I do now. And another thing, too, my father was the clerk of the school board.
Oh, okay.
So he got to have all the interviews of all the people who came that wanted a job of teaching. And my youngest brother and I would sneak around and try and get a good look at them before any of the school kids did. You know, we wanted to know who they were first. My other 2 brothers had graduated from high school by then. But my younger brother and I went to school as close together as 4 years could do it.
And, were your parents involved in any organizations at all in the community?
Well, just my dad was a Mason, and my mother was Eastern Star. And that was all of their. They did not go to church. And we had 8 churches in White Bluffs.
Oh, okay.
And they were all active. No, there were 6. 6. I'm great. I'm too far.
And what about the town itself? What sorts of businesses do you remember, or stores, or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that?
You want to bring that in, Leslie? It's out there. I didn't bring the right one. The tablet. Just seeing that picture reminded me of a lot of their names. Okay, the grocery store was the first thing, and his name was Dick Ryerson, Reirson. And then we had a drugstore, but it was a pharmacy. And he had an ice cream table, and he had a distorted hand, and he used to put the ice cream cone down in there, you know, with the little top, and then reach down in that. Remember those cans that had the ice cream in it?
Yeah.
And, you know, good old hard ice cream and put in there, and never drop a drop. He was also the band leader for the high school music. And then there was the power company, and I could not remember the lady's name, but they had Pacific Power there. And he had a Ford dealer. with a service company. That was Fred Gilhooly, Gillhualy. And they were 4 boys. Now, I don't know if they're around Yakima or gone by now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I know I know the name because one boy said he was flying home from California to Yakima, and they were taking, so many people had to get off the airplane, but he got to ride all the way to Yakima. Went to get off the plane, the little stewardess said, "How do you pronounce your last name?" They couldn't tell him to get off the airplane because they couldn't pronounce his name. So that was good. And Levi Austin was the superintendent at the high school.
Okay.
And the Austin name is from Prosser. The one boy had a hardware store in Prosser. But I keep thinking, they're still there, but I'm just lucky to live as long as I have. Because they were my brother's age.
Oh, okay.
You see, and everybody's gone. So, I don't remember any of the teachers.
Okay.
I don't remember the principal, but I remember the principal of the high school took us all in the next morning after Pearl Harbor and told us, that they had bombed Pearl Harbor.
Is that how you found out about it then?
World War II, yes. Because remember Franklin Roosevelt, this day will be known in infamy. Well, I heard that, of course, and it never went away. And then my father, this was years before we moved to this ranch, the first ranch we had when we were all little.
Mm-hmm.
My father and the neighbor built this warehouse, and it had where they came in with the apples, and they poured them in this water bath, and then it went down and the women sorted off all the bad, and the other ladies were packing the apples with paper, that little paper,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd go on a roller to the lidder, and he would put the lid on and stack them up, and then 2 more people would come with these lifts and carry the 5 boxes of apples across a ramp and put them on the truck until they got the truck loaded, and then they would take it to the White Bluffs, to the railroad.
Oh, okay.
The Milwaukee Railroad came into White Bluffs, and they would take them to Yakima.
And that's how the
Mhm.
apples would get shipped
Mhm.
out.
And Parham Fruit, I don't even know if they're still there, but my father worked for them after he had to leave White Bluffs and went to Seattle, or went to the Yakima.
When you were growing up on the farm, did you have any chores, any things that you did?
No,
growing up?
I was little. I was little. No. And we said, I said we didn't have any indoor plumbing, and we didn't have any running water. And my brother reminds me so much of Wes, the boy you met. Said, well, Jeannie said, we just put the bucket on the rope and put it down, and get a bucket of water and wind the rope up, grab a hold of the buck, and if you were still able, you'd run the water to the house. So he tried to tell me that we did have running water. But I know I probably took care of the chickens or something like that. I didn't have any pets.
Did you swim in the river at all or anything like that?
No, no. I was too little. The boys did. And we'd go out in one of these peach orchards. There were a lot of orchards in White Bluffs. Beautiful orchards. And they also had irrigating water. A pretty British, no. What's a Puget? What's over here? Where the river goes under the bridge?
I'm not sure.
Priest River.
Oh, please.
Priest Rapids.
Priest Rapids, sure.
Priest Rapids irrigation. And it had, they had paid in money for the upkeep of it. And that was one of the things that the boys, some White Bluffs boy told me. Did you ever get any money back from your, what do you call that? Whenever you give money, have money yearly, it's not a donation, and it's a cost.
Mm-hmm. Fee or something.
Great, like, oh, I can't think. Okay. And no, we didn't ever have any, but they did have plenty of water. That's one thing they did have up there, was plenty of water. And those peach orchards, they could afford to clean up new land and bring in new trees and have the water. And they could, with the winters that we had there, their fruit would get onto the market before California would get up here, get up to Yakima. So when the company came in to take over, they gave my dad about $5 an acre, and these guys got maybe 20. And they were all rich enough to hire lawyers, and they hired lawyers, and the lawyer got them much more money for their land, but it was worth it to see those brand new trees get just bulldozed over.
Yeah. I was wondering if you remember any special community events or celebrations with any 4th of July celebrations or picnics or anything like that?
No.
Boat races? Anything?
I can't remember any specific. I do remember that they built next to the high school something called a community hall, and they would have dances, and the boys would play basketball, and maybe Kennewick would come up and play basketball. They'd have basketball games. But as far as Grange, they did not participate.
So, let's see.
Oh, in this orchard, in the warehouse, yes, I told you that before, that he had about 16 people that they hired, and my mother was the bookkeeper, and so these people were getting money every Friday night, 1934 and for 35, and so he had lots of friends. Lots of people liked him because he did provide for people to get a job. There were no jobs as far as work was concerned. The grocery store would hire his nephew was there, and the drugstore did it by himself. And one lady, Mrs. Leander, was the postmistress. She took care of the post office. I don't know who any of the people were that came around to deliver the mail.
You mentioned earlier that there was sort of the initial farm that your parents had, and then your father he had moved at some point. Is that right?
Yes.
About how old were you at that time then?
Well, according to the pictures on the at home, I was about 4, because I was just with the kids as they would stand out there to go to school. I wasn't going to school. And then I cannot tell you how long it was, but it was a big blow to leave that house and that yard and go over to a house where workers had lived in all of their life. And they had cardboard on the walls, covering up the wood. And I had one bedroom, then I got to have the bedroom. And there was a big porch in the front. And the 3 boys slept in part of it, and Mother and Dad slept in the other. But the weather over there was never cold. I guess it was hot, but I don't remember that. I'm sure it was hot, 'cause it was desert.
And how far away would the second place have been from your first house? Was it fairly close, or?
I would say 3.5 miles, just up over a hill.
And then you lived there until you moved to Yakima?
Yes.
You want to talk then about, you mentioned when you heard about World War II beginning, do you want to talk about your brothers? And I understand they all joined the service at some point, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that was while you were still living in White Bluffs, or?
No, Yakima.
Okay.
Well, you're right. They were, but then they left, because they were all. One was going to university, and the other 2 were going to Washington State, and they joined in 41, and then we had to move in 43. But they said, "Mom, don't worry about moving to Yakima, because we can get to Yakima from anywhere in the world, but we can't get to White Bluffs." So they were probably already in the service, doing their first camp or something. And I had no idea in the world what reconnaissance meant. He did not fight a war, but he was in reconnaissance until I looked it up in the dictionary. And he was fighting the war up in the air, taking pictures of their movements, the Japanese movements. And my other brother was in a tanker taking fuel from New Orleans to France in the Atlantic. And he said that the Atlantic was full of German submarines. He said there were 4 days that they didn't even take their clothes off. But his was brand new, and he could not go as slow as everybody else did, and he could go faster than their convoy, so he circled their own convoy without any cover, because he said his boat would not go that slow. And my other brother was in the Marine fighter pilot, and I don't know if you knew the story about Ted Williams, but Ted Williams' group came in whenever my brother left that camp. Ted Williams came in. And I just heard that on the, because people look at me, and say, Ted Williams, the baseball player? And I said, yes, he went to war. And he was in a group that came in and took over where my brother had been.
You had mentioned earlier that you started seeing some cars or vehicles that said U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember any more about that? Anything else that happened?
Well, that was our first. There was gossip around that they were going to, I don't know, that they were going to take over and build a atomic bomb or something on our land, that we were going to have to leave. Well, until it came to push, and then came shove. But these station wagons were shown up, and each one of them had about 4 men sitting in it, and they were surveying the land, and they had surveyed how many houses there were and what condition they were in, because some houses were ready to be burned and a few houses were moved and the rest of them were demolished. And then all of a sudden it came across that you were going to have to move by the 15th of September. They gave them the date. And my mother worked on an election board. And whatever year that was, I don't know. But she wanted to stay and work on that last board. And I have been told later that that was the only money she was going to move with, was what she got paid for. She had a sister that lived in Yakima, and they found us an apartment. And it was just 2 rooms. Oh, goodness, it was small. But that was where we were. And my dad stayed to work on the orchard. They let him stay until the crops were all picked. And he sent the last bunch of apples off that orchard to Yakima.
How did you feel about having to leave, or did your parents ever express anything about?
They did not, because as I've said before, I said we were poor. Leslie just said we didn't have any money. And so we all got jobs. I got babysitting jobs with a little neighborhood girl. The mother was there, but I would just go over there and play with her, and get maybe 25 cents or something. Well, it was that's all there was. And if you didn't drive, I couldn't go anywhere. Gas was rationed. And then we went to Yakima. And I graduated on about the 3rd of June and went to work on the 6th. And I said to Mother, now don't wake me up. I'm going to sleep for 2 days. And she woke me up and said, well, there's an ad in the paper. The newspaper wants help. And I said, well, I'll go see. Well, I got taken that day. I worked there for 7 years. In the advertising, Johnny, doing anything that they wanted done, I would do it. I ran the switchboard. I did a lot of odd jobs there. But I was in advertising. Yeah, I have to tell you that for sale notes to be published in the paper. And Friday night, he had to have everything had to be back in the room to get onto Sunday's paper at least by 5 o'clock Friday night. And this one man would invariably come about 20 after 4. And every time I could, I would leave the room. But I got a hold of him one time. And he had cattle for sale. And I was writing it down. And he had a milking shorthorn bull. And I wrote it down, and I looked at it. That's what it said, a milking shorthorn bull. I said, that's not possible. Oh, he said, you city girls don't know a thing. That's what it is. Put it in the paper. I couldn't ask my father wouldn't have known what a shorthorn bull was either. Oh, I never will forget that. So I found out later that that's a breed of animal. That's what they're called.
I was asking about leaving White Bluffs. Did your parents get any money for their property at all, or?
I have no idea. Money was never spoken of. I know that we took what furniture that there was suitable, and we had an aunt and uncle that lived in Sunnyside, and they came over with an old truck and took our whatever we couldn't take, because when we went to Yakima, they said the apartment was furnished, so we didn't take anything, and that was bad, because what they had furnished we didn't want to sleep on, and we'd already sent our stuff to Sunnyside, so we slept on a Davenport till we got enough money to. And mother went to work for a lady that lived up the street. Had a little milk and bread grocery store, and she had 2 sons in the service, and so she and mother had lots in common. And mother would go to work for her 2 days for a couple of hours, 2 days a week. And that was what we bought groceries with.
When you were living in White Bluffs, how did you get news? Was there a newspaper? Did you have a radio?
I never read a newspaper. I don't know anything about that. As soon as I got into the newspaper business, I read everything I can. I don't know. And as I said before, the radio we had was run by a battery. And the kids, the boys, were allowed to have 30 minutes of radio when they got home from school. One of them was Jimmy Austin. Remember well, you probably don't remember. It was an airplane. My one brother was crazy about airplanes then. And then they got into some stupid, I think that was television, though. And then my dad was a great newsman, and he would listen to the Richfield Reporter.
And how about you? Did you listen to anything on the radio?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. I was wondering if you ever had a opportunity to go back to White Bluffs at some point later during maybe one of the Hanford White Bluffs reunions or anything like that. Were you able to go back and see the area at all?
Just 3 times I have. One was our 60th graduation, and the 4 I told you about, we had 4, and the other 3 came, and that was when he took my girlfriend and I up to the Harry Anderson, took us up to our homes. Otherwise, we would just join the convoy that would go out around and around and around and come back in and drive through what White Bluff streets were to get back out to the park.
When you were able to go back and see the area, were there any things that you recognized at all that were still there, or was pretty much everything gone?
Well, a lot of the houses were still there, of the girls that I used to go visit and knew about. And the warehouse was there. And the warehouse, just about the last time, the last packing he did was when he left. And a windstorm had come in, and it was just boards, and the wind leveled it. So that was the end of that. And our hay barn, our cow barn, had collapsed, and I didn't want to go back anymore. It wasn't home.
What do you think it's important for people to know about the community of White Bluffs?
I want them to know that we were a community. We had stores, we had grocery stores, we had a barber shop, had the power company, we had electricity at home. My mother had a electric washing machine, which was very, very rare, but the boys had made enough money in the service to help her buy some stuff. So she had an electric stove, and she had a wood stove. And the electric stove is what she baked in. Used it for baking. Because she always made, because we had so many apples, she used to always make apple pie. The wood stove had a great big reservoir. So if you wanted hot water, you started the stove. You'd have enough hot water to wash the dishes at supper time and wash your face to go to bed. And I can relate to something else that's kind of bad to these kids, but every morning after breakfast, before we went to school, we'd put a little bit of soda and a little bit of salt in the palm of our hand, and take our dry toothbrush and mix that together. Have a glass of water, and the four of us went outside and stood outside on the lawn, and we'd all brush our teeth. Dip in the water and dip over here. We didn't have toothpaste, but I guess soda and salt worked just as well. We never had candy. We did have apple pie and chocolate cake. Mother did bake. And my father had that cow, and would have a calf. And whenever the calf got big enough, he'd butcher it. And it would hang up in a tree. It was cool. It was always in the fall that he'd butcher that cow, or butcher the calf. And they'd go out and cut some meat, take it in and have for supper. So it was very, very pioneer, true. But as I said before, Leslie has made me think we were not poor.
Right. Did you go to any other towns very much at all, to Pasco or Kennewick?
Pasco, we went for a doctor because I got real sick in my 5th grade. I had Bright's disease, don't even know what it is. But the doctors now say, well, I'm glad you had it then because they don't want you to have it now. And I had to stay in the hospital in Pasco. And my mother would come twice a week. And she'd say, how are you doing? Oh, I said, I wish you'd bring me some water from home. This water they give me they always put my medicine in my water. And I said, I don't like it that way. I like to be able to drink a drink of water. And she said, well, they shouldn't put your medicine in your water. So she went out to the nurse and said, Jean said that the water isn't good. Well, she complains to me too, but she's drinking city water that had chlorine in it, and I didn't like it.
How long were you in the hospital for that?
About 2 weeks. To me, that was a long ways to be from home.
Mm-hmm. And about how old were you at the time?
I was in 5th grade. I think I was 11. Bright's disease, I think it was a kidney problem. And the doctor, without telling me, told my mother that I may not ever be able to have children. So nobody told me anything about that until after I got married. And I had 4 children in 6 years, so I proved them wrong. All doctors aren't right.
Were there doctors in White Bluffs?
I was born there, yes. And that's what one of my friends said. You couldn't have been born in White Bluffs unless you were born at home. I said, no, I was born in White Bluffs. There was a little house there, and there was some doctor. I don't know who he was. He was an old man. And the lady I talked to, the nurse, was a retired Army nurse. And she said she had studied what's baby birth? It's not pediatrics.
Not pediatrics?
Well, anyhow,
Midwifery, maybe?
Yeah. Well, that's what she was. She was a midwife.
Oh.
So, yeah. The boys were all born in Yakima.
Oh, okay.
My mother would go over there and stay with her mother.
Oh, okay. But you were born in White
I
Bluffs?
was born in White Bluffs. And isn't that funny? I can remember that White House. It was spotless. And there was no dogs and cats running around in it. No children, just that old man and that lady. But I made it through, so.
Are any other memories or stories, things you remember from growing up that we haven't talked about yet or haven't asked you about yet that you'd like to talk about?
No, that ended up with the Republic, and then I got married. Well, I worked 7 years at the newspaper office.
Mm-hmm.
And the picnics and things that we had was over on the other house where we had the big lawn. We always had a picnic there. A lot of those people that were working at the warehouse would come over on Sunday and bring one dish or something, and all their kids, and they would play on our yard, because we had water in the yard that came to go to the orchard. It had been derailed and come onto the yard. And he had an old lawnmower and mowed it, so it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a lot of company, because everybody was beholding to my father. So that's about all I can remember. But I wanted to express myself that this is really from my heart, because I have wanted to do this. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate all your help and the other people coming in and standing there waiting for us to get done.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being willing to share your stories. This has been terrific. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And the weather there, the weather in White Bluffs, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm not-
No.
It was beautiful, even though it was desert.
Mhm.
It was. We had warm winters. I do not remember any snow, and it was a long trip from White Bluffs to Yakima, in an old car.
Was that the Ford?
No. Oh my, no.
No.
We had a big Chevrolet.
Oh, okay.
My brother bought it, and then they went to war.
Mm. So you took the Chevrolet to
Mhm.
Yakima.
So, well, I am a very happy person.
Well, thank you very much again. Really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
You got it?
Yeah.
You guys didn't talk about it here. I heard you talking about the regatta.
Oh, yeah. The boat regatta. There was a photo of cars lined up on the river.
Mhm.
Or did you want to talk about that at all? Do you have any memories about the?
Oh yes, because two of our men were in in two of those boats. One of them was the wheel. I can't remember what the other man's name was. I don't remember too much about it because to me the boats were just going around and around, and the rest of us kids were up either trying to get ice cream or see how many rocks we could pick up or something. You know, it wasn't. And that's another thing too. I probably mentioned that before. We were never afraid. We're never afraid, day or night. If somebody new came into town, he was well covered. And everybody knew who he was in 10 days, 5 days. So,
The boat regattas, did that happen every year? Was that something that was sort of a yearly
as
thing?
far as I remember, I cannot say it was every year. Maybe every year for 5 years or something like that. And that was one of the biggest events. There was no rodeos, and no parades that I can ever remember. So,
Great. Thank you again.
Thank you.